Hello there, my name is Lonnie Ayers, and I founded SAP BDA Consulting almost 10 years ago. I've been working in SAP for 17 years and originally started working on SAP BW in 1999. As a senior SAP project manager, I have the great privilege that my phone rings off the hook every day with job offers, and as well, my inbox is full of jobs. At some point, the market decides you're qualified for a job, and the only thing they want to know is your rate. This doesn't mean you won't have to interview, but simply that if they're calling and emailing you, they think you're qualified and you might be sellable. And as experience and advanced training and negotiation indicates, he who throws out the first number in any negotiation usually loses the negotiation. Sometimes that is unavoidable, because if a recruiter won't quote a rate, they usually will, and it will always, and I repeat always, be a lowball rate that isn't based on anything more than thin air, as recruiters do not usually know what was negotiated in the actual statement of work, or SOW, for which they are recruiting, and if they do know, they are going to try to maximize their margin at your expense. You either have to drop the opportunity, usually not really the point of the entire ordeal, or you need to put a number out there that will be competitive. But again, after literally responding to hundreds of recruiters, 852 specifically, I decided that I needed to have better information if I was to make these little mini negotiations go my way and ensure we both were in a win-win situation fully informed by the facts. In short, I need to make this process less asymmetrical. That is why I set about developing a consulting rate calculator to quickly help determine what rate you must make for the job to make sense. It is based on almost 30 years of consulting experience, backed up by an equal number of years of expense records. With it, with only a couple of input points, you can work out jointly with your recruiter what the rate is you will take, and he and you will understand why you are asking for what you're asking for. In other words, we take the guesswork out of what is an otherwise opaque process and provide objective numbers to what rate you must have in order to take the job. We also provide you a way to adjust all the cost elements you may not actually be taking into account when you decide on the rate. What does this help you do? First off, let's be clear. This isn't a salary calculator such as what you find on sites like Paycheck City, which are designed mostly to tell you what your take-home pay might be. Instead, it is designed to tell you what rate you must get for the job to make sense. Here is where it really helps you. When you get an offer for a consulting role where they don't want to pay expenses, you can quickly say, okay, here's what that all-in rate is. In my experience, 100% of the time, a recruiter or a company will state that those expense assumptions are wrong, because it is to their advantage to make you believe you can live cheaper when you cannot, and the documentation is there for all to see. Again, just the facts. In many cases, our calculator will tell you if you're currently employed that you shouldn't take the job being offered. But we take it far beyond that simple binary decision. We also tell you how long you will have to work in the new job to break even. This is purely economic analysis. You should treat the new job like any project, subject to cost justification based on ROI analysis. More critically, since projects by definition have a start and finish date, if the calculator is telling you your break-even is 9 months and the project is only supposed to last for 6 months, a very typical situation, then this job is not for you, at least not at the rate they're offering. But break-even is not really what you want to be doing either. If you are a highly valuable consultant and are going to be spending long periods of time away from hearth and home, you need to be compensated for that, and thus break-even is not good enough. You probably aren't charging nearly enough. That is why the big guys routinely quote $400 an hour and above, yet you're only being paid $60, $70, or $100. You don't have enough information to change the conversation. With this, now you do. So now let's jump into our demo. I won't spend forever on this because it's a really simple calculator, and that's the point. It takes only a couple of seconds to run this. But this is the basic input screen for our consulting rate calculator. It will help you determine whether you should take the job or walk away from the job. So all you really need to do is to, besides put in your name and your email, is put in your current hourly rate. If you're, this is assuming that you're currently working a job. If they've given you a new job offer, then put that rate in. And then finally, put in your target pay increase, the percent you'd like to increase your current salary by. In my case, I've put in 50%, and then just hits to this little button right here. And we'll let it do its calculations in the background. And all right, so our results are ready. And there's a lot of numbers here, and you can ignore them all if you want. But that box right there is the number you need to worry about. And just to make sure that we've got the most up-to-date numbers, let's go ahead and recalculate it. So what it's telling you is that you need to make $311 an hour as an all-inclusive rate to equal $150 an hour that you're currently making, and still cover your expenses both where you live and where you're going. Now, these are tax-adjusted and expense-adjusted figures. So let's break it down just a little bit. So we know that, that sounds like a large number, but that's just the math. But what about the project? What's the thing actually telling you about the project? Well, the first thing you need to know is that it will take you 2 full months before you see your first paycheck. That's the typical situation. And that means you need a lot of money in your pocket to cover the expenses that you're going to be incurring both where you live and at the target location. About, according to this, $64,000. Seems like a lot, but they add right up. And your monthly net after covering your expenses is going to be about $7,200. And finally, it's going to take 8 months to break even on this project, which is a long time. Now, if they tell you it's a 6-month project, you shouldn't take this project. That rate is not high enough. Let's break it down. How we arrive at that figure? So the first thing to know is that you live someplace and you have expenses. Maybe you have a wife and children, they're in school, but the bottom line is that there's expenses. We've kept the categories here, and there's room at the bottom, and I'll show you in a minute on how you can adjust these however you want. You may have other expenses that are not shown here, but we think we've covered the main ones. But just to kind of break it down, at $150 an hour, your current job, that means your daily rate, simple calculations, $1,200. $24,000 a month, or $288,000 a year. Very, very good wage. Hard to walk away from that. Your new job, though, $180 an hour is what it's going to take. But now we have to add the expenses on top of that, and we know it's going to take at least $4,000 a month to fly back and forth once a week. If you've got to go to more than one location or an expensive destination, this may well be higher. Rental car. $2,000 a month for probably a mid-sized to small-sized car. If you have to pay insurance and the company doesn't cover it, you can double that number. Hotels, they add right up. Food, that's not realistic. For most people, food's going to be closer to $800. The rent is not relevant here because you're staying in a hotel. And then finally, laundry, things like that. So on the right, we kind of combine all these to come up with a profit and loss statement for your overall project. But your expenses, this is your fixed one, and this is your new expenses in your new target location. And actually what it says is that, well, you're not going to make that much more money even with this higher rate. So is it really worth it? Don't really know. So $87,000 a year is going to be your total net income. So, it's nothing to sneeze at. But let's say, well, that was my first pass through. And I want to make some adjustments. And I say, well, I think it's going to cost me more than that. Transportation is really going to cost me $3,000. Well, you just come in here, put it in. Food, let's adjust that to a more realistic $1,000 a month. If you're the project manager and you've got to cover the expenses, that number may well be thousands a month, and you definitely can't be covering that. You can just update this right here inside this. It's got to go away and do some calculations. Unfortunately, there is quite a bit of work going on in the background. And the main thing that you can adjust besides your expenses is your tax rate. And you're going to find that the tax rate makes all the difference in the world on these projects. That's why I personally worked in the Middle East. There was no income tax on all this. So here it is. It's spitting it back out. And you can see all-inclusive rates dropped about $9 an hour, I think, down to $301. So that was a quick demo of how you can use the calculator to figure out what the rate is that you got to be asking for before the new job makes sense. And one last thing I'd like to cover is some of the scenarios that you might run across out there. This calculator is actually designed to work with all of them. But what you might hear is rate plus expenses. That's kind of time and materials, but not totally. time and materials, straight up work so many hours, and then anything you have to buy, expenses are done there. The one that you're going to get constantly hit on is all-inclusive rate. They're basically wanting you to take the risk of any variations in your expenses. Personally, I avoid these projects at all cost. Finally, they're looking for a yearly rate, but remember, it's a project. It's unlikely to last a year. If it does, it's already a much longer project than it probably should have been. And remember, the SAP ASAP methodology is based on 3, 6, and 9-month project cycles. Other scenarios is 3-month duration project, 6-month, 9-month, 12-month. The main message there is to understand that break-even point. If it's a 3-month project, you really need a good rate to make it worthwhile, especially if you have a good existing job. But even if you don't have a good existing job, you still have to have a lot of money in your pocket to take this project. Then there's other variations that primarily affect your expenses and sometimes your tax rate, depending on your state tax situation, that come down to whether it's remote, a little bit remote, or a lot remote, or whether it's an expenses paid gate. These pop up in my world where I'm asked to support some sort of pre-sales scenario where there's no actual salary. We're jointly pursuing the opportunity, but I can't invest in it, so they have to cover my expenses. Again, this is Lonnie Ayers, and this was a demonstration of our consulting rate calculator and how you can determine what the rate is that you need to either get to take the job or make the decision to walk away from the offer. Thank you. And if you got any questions, feel free to reach out.